Hi, I'm Barry, and welcome to the Simplicity Zen podcast. This is our next in our series of the Zen Lamp series. Today, I'm pleased to have Robert Rosenbaum with us. Hello, Robert. Thank you for coming.
Hi.
Could you give people a little bit, a brief introduction to what type of teaching activities you're doing now, just so people have a context of, of what the kind of story is leading to, so to speak?
Sure. Well, the pandemic kind of threw things into disarray, but I'm hoping to establish a Ordinary Mind Zen group here in Sacramento. We'll see how that goes. We're going to have our first meeting in about a month. What I had originally wanted to do, and still may do, is to have a kind of neighborhood meditation center, and to just go out in the neighborhood and leave leaflets on everyone's door saying, okay, every morning we get up, we sit for a while, do this in the evenings, anyone's welcome to come, without being terribly orthodox about you have to do it this way and this is the form, but we'll use, well, Ordinary Mind uses forms which look a lot like Soto Zen, and you wouldn't be able to tell much difference between the two. So we'll use those forms, but kind of lightly. I'm leading a group which I started about 10 years ago now in the Sierra foothills. We meet just once a month, sometimes twice a month. And I'm also leading a group of studying the paramitas, which had been a precepts study group. And I've got a book coming out on the Surangama Sutra, and I'm active in the Lay Zen Teachers Association.
Great. Your book comes out in June, is that correct?
Well, apparently the pandemic and the supply chain stuff might put it off till August or September.
I see. Great. Looking forward to seeing it. What's your approach to it? Are you talking to it from a practice standpoint, a historical standpoint?
Oh, very much a practice standpoint. Whenever I read a sutra or any Buddhist material, the question is, well, so how does this affect my life? How can I live my life in accordance with this, or how can it inform my life? So it's been interesting taking this rather esoteric sutra and finding lots of very pragmatic instructions in it. It's really affected my my practice, which is why I'm eager to share it with other people, because it's not that well known in the Zen community in the West. It's more known in the Chinese Chan lineage.
Is this the sutra that Valerie Beer copied by hand, or is that a different one?
No, that's a different sutra.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Before we dive in, you wrote a book I really liked. I'm trying to think the title of it. It was about the intersection of Taoism and Zen. What was the title of that book?
Walking the Way?
Yeah, Walking the Way. Yeah.
81 Zen Encounters with the Tao Te Ching.
Yeah, I love that book. Anyway, so kind of diving into your life, could you talk about a little bit where you grew up, what kind of cultural or religious upbringing you had, and anything that might be relevant to your practice from that period in your life?
Sure. Well, I grew up in Mount Vernon, New York, which was essentially an extension of the Bronx, to Jewish parents, actually an extended family, because we mostly had, most of the time I was growing up, we had my grandparents living with us. And I'm going to do a very slight detour. I wrote another book a couple of years ago, which was never published, coming to terms with my Jewish heritage. And actually, Norman Fisher was going to write little capping poems where I would try and form a koan from each weekly reading from the Jewish Torah, the first 5 books of the Bible. And Norman had asked me, well, so why are you doing this? It can't be that you just, because I said to him, I ran across this book on the Torah and somehow I got into it. He said, nah, that's not it. There's got to be something else going on. And I realized, so my mother's father was a pious Jew in the old country, very well respected.
What country is that?
Well, one of those countries in the Pale. So Poland, Ukraine, Lithuania, kept changing hands. Yeah. Well-respected, pious Jew in the old country, moved to upstate or central New York, and was a junk man with 8 or 9 children, never made enough money to support his family, and was despised by the community. A lot of conflict in his family because all he cared about was his religious life, really. And when he died, the synagogue opened its doors to him. But when he lived with us and his wife was dementing at the time, as was he, she would spit at him. She was so angry at him for making life difficult for her. She ran a boarding house. But every morning he'd get up and he'd pray. And so I would see that. Now, I didn't understand it because I was 3, 4, 5 years old, but he would do that. So I sort of inherited this conflict of, wow, here's someone who gives his whole life to a practice. And it has mixed effects for him and the people around him. And my family sent me to a Hebrew school, and I grew up learning Jewish ways, but they were not observant themselves.
Were they Reform or?
They were conservative. Okay. And actually my father would go to a Orthodox synagogue eventually, but they didn't say prayers. They didn't, light the Shabbos lights. I mean, it was a high holy days, Passover kind of upbringing. And I never quite understood, why were they so passionately attached to their Jewish heritage? Hint, the Holocaust had something to do with that.
I see.
But not observant. And the actual Jewish upbringing, while rich in some ways, was very harsh. And it wasn't a happy, fun place. Well, if you grow up Jewish, happy and fun and religion don't go together exactly.
Is it austere, or what is it? Like what?
Oh, it was just, this was in the 1950s, and virtually every adult practicing Jew had been traumatized by the Holocaust. And there was a bitterness and how, many people lost their faith. How could God allow this to happen? And a harshness of, if you whispered or joked during Hebrew school, you'd be severely reprimanded and punished. And actually, when I entered adolescence, I went, what's all this about? After being a very good Jewish boy. And every time I'd go into a synagogue, I'd get depressed. And one of the things that I started looking around for in college was, well, how to come to terms with this. And I was fortunate in encountering a a teacher who introduced me to some of Martin Buber's work on, well, I and thou, as you're probably familiar with. The thou is ungraspable and unknowable, which sounds a little Buddhist, doesn't it?
Definitely.
And there's actually quite a lot in Jewish mysticism. And Martin Buber was drawing on the Hasidim quite a bit in Jewish mysticism, which overlaps with Zen. In fact, I wound up, after taking a few courses, writing a paper comparing Hasidism with Zen. And there's quite a bit of overlap, quite a bit of difference as well.
Were you, like, through your kind of tween and adolescent years, were you an atheist? Or did you believe in a higher power? Like, what was?
I would say I was an angriest. I was just mad at everything, and depressed. And I performed very well in high school, but I felt incredible pressures, and actually when I went to college, and I went to an elite school, which turned out to be not just elite, but effete, with a lot of alumni sons. It was an all-male school at the time, who were there, and they hadn't worked very hard to get there. And I was mad about that. And I was mad about, religion being hypocritical and adults being hypocritical, kind of classic adolescent.
Did you experience? Oh, sorry. Go ahead, please.
Well, it was the time of the Vietnam War and great disillusionment with establishment norms. And I participated in that. Yeah.
Did you experience any anti-Semitism growing up or in college?
Yes. And actually as late, well, the small town that my father moved, my grandfather, my mother's father moved to, was very anti-Semitic. And in fact, my mother would talk about meeting people who didn't know she was Jewish, and she'd say her name and they'd say, "Are you Jewish?" And they'd never met a Jewish person. And they'd say, "Well, how can you be Jewish? You don't have horns coming out of your head." And they were serious.
It's crazy.
So she had experienced a lot of anti-Semitism. My father, growing up in the New York City area, had experienced a lot of very positive things about Jewish community culture and had a lot of Jewish friends. So they had a very mixed situation. My mother was very ambivalent and conflicted, and my father was just, "Hey, this is great stuff," without ever being particularly observant or serious about it. As late as 1978, my wife at the time had been invited to a Christmas celebration by a firm that she worked for, a very small, closely knit family firm that came out of Concord, Massachusetts. So very classic white Anglo-Saxon, small buddy network. And they were holding their Christmas party at a Boston private club. And they were very upset when they found out that my wife was married to a Jewish person, because she kept her own name. And the club did not allow Jewish people.
Really, in 1978?
1978. So I and one other person had to be snuck in a side door in order to get into the club. So, and actually even past then, when I worked in Hayward, south of the Bay Area, many of the clients in Hayward, when they heard my name, would comment on my being Jewish and how they didn't feel comfortable talking to somebody who was Jewish, and how could I understand them? And yeah.
Wow. How soon did you know you wanted to what was your career path? Were you a neurologist or a psychotherapist, or what?
Once I figured out what I was going to do.
Yeah, like what was your career path?
So I'll just say that during my early 20s, when I was a Marxist, Leninist, communal participant, I had troubles deciding on a career path. And I eventually decided that because the social and economic conditions were so harmful to people, my one requirement for a career path was that it wouldn't cause any harm. And I thought, well, as a psychotherapist, that shouldn't do too bad, and it's interesting, and maybe I'll even help some people. So I went into that, and then during my training, by accident, I stumbled into a training place, which at the time I had not known beforehand, but at the time it was the best place in the world for neuropsychology.
Where was this?
This was the Boston Veterans Administration. And all of the people who were interested in, well, how does the brain affect behavior? And how does behavior affect the brain? Were there. And it was an amazing experience. And so I said, hey, I want in on this. So I got trained as a neuropsychologist as well as a psychotherapist, and wanted to work in the community psychology, basically, and neuropsychology.
Did you get a doctorate?
Oh, yes, I got a PhD in psychology. And most of my life, I worked roughly half-time in neuropsychology, which also partook of behavioral medicine and psychotherapy.
Was this more in more research or more clinical, or both?
More clinical. I did some research, actually did some fairly influential research, though I didn't know it at the time, but mostly clinical.
And so what was your first interaction with Eastern spirituality? Like what was your gate towards that world?
Well, in college, took a course which was kind of a survey course on religions and varieties of mystical experience, Christian and Jewish and Hindu and Buddhist. And I'm remembering now. So my college had a PE requirement, a phys ed requirement, which you could satisfy by doing yoga.
Okay.
And I said, hey, why not?
Was this in the early 70s?
Late 60s.
Late 60s, okay.
Yeah, how did you guess? And the person who taught yoga was actually an assistant dean of students who was an ex-Marine, really big, bald, looked like Mr. Clean, if anyone, but he taught Hatha yoga, and he taught it very beautifully as a union of body, mind, breath, spirituality. And I learned quite a bit from him. So that was a first opening to, well, just quieting down and relaxing. and how mind and body are related to each other.
Mm-hmm.
And then, of course, yoga, at least how it was taught there, had a meditation component to it.
Mm-hmm.
And I took a course on various religions,
Mm-hmm.
which was interesting. And then I wanted to take a class at Smith College. So I was in the 5 college area, and I wanted to take a class where there were women, not just men.
Mm-hmm.
So I wound up taking a course on Japanese culture and religion at Smith College, which was my first introduction to, amongst other things, Zen, and attended my first session with Joshu Sasaki Roshi there. And at the same time, I began studying, I was a music major at the time, the Japanese bamboo flute, the shakuhachi. I stumbled across it, and its sound was so amazing to me. And then, disliking my college, my home college of Amherst, I discovered a program which would let me spend a year and a half in Japan to complete my college time. So I went to Japan to study shakuhachi, Japanese music, and Japanese culture, and wound up spending several years in Japan, where I also lived in a zendo some part of the time, lived in the shakuhachi. It was Omori Roshi's zendo.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Very nice.
And I had been pursuing Rinzai Zen and koan study, originally from Sasaki Roshi.
Mm-hmm.
And when I lived in Omori Roshi's zendo, I got turned off to Zen. People were, and this sometimes happens in Rinzai Zen, they'd boast about how many koans they had solved.
Mm-hmm.
And one day I was talking to my shakuhachi teacher, and he said, "Oh, you're at Omori Roshi Zendo, he's very right-wing." And I went, "What do you mean? I mean, he's a Zen teacher. There's no such thing as right-wing politics in Zen, is there?" You can see how naive and uninformed I was. Just, well, yeah, he was a war criminal, and he was given a choice between going to prison or going to a Zen monastery. I went, whoa! So between that and the fact that it was winter and very cold, and my shakuhachi teacher invited me to join his house, I went there, and I meditated on my own for quite a few years. Just
so you left the zendo earlier than you were scheduled to.
Yeah. Oh, and I should say I lived for a time with 2 friends who had been a Zen nun and a Zen priest or monk. I don't think he had been ordained yet, but yeah, I had quite a disillusioning experience with Zen, because both of these folks were, very much still Zen practitioners, but they had left the monastery and the convent because they were in, of course, separate Zen centers, separated by a hill, and somehow they'd met each other and fallen in love. And so they would run up to the top of the hill at midnight, make passionate love, have sex, and go back down for the 4 a.m. Zen sitting. And one day, Takayoshi came back from a passionate night, and he was sitting in the zendo, and he was exhausted. Must have been quite a night. And he fell asleep in Zazen. And the Rinzai, Takayoshi told me this, the Rinzai, I forget the term, the person who had the wake-up stick, came around and saw him and bowed to him and went, whop, whop. Takayoshi didn't move. He was so tired. Again, whop, whop, didn't move. Third time, the person went, whop, broke the stick, and Takayoshi didn't move. And because of that, Takayoshi said, everyone in the Zendo said, he has such deep samadhi. He is so enlightened. We must all bow to Takayoshi. And yeah, so there's a lot of, at least back in those days, there was a lot of myth around enlightenment and Zen and whatnot. And it didn't fit with what I had thought Zen was about. So, although I continued to meditate, I tried different kinds of meditation, sometimes Hindu, sometimes, I ran across the Theosophists and did those kinds of meditation. And I will say, spending a year staring at a stone was really good practice. But, you know, I had children, I was working.
Did you have, so this is after coming back from Japan?
Yes, yes. I met my wife. I went to graduate school. We moved to Boston. We had our first child, moved back to the West Coast. And, you know, the hurricane years of, as you well know, of raising children, working, still continued to meditate pretty regularly. But it wasn't at the forefront of what I was doing until I got a Fulbright to go to India. And, you know, whenever you say, oh, so I went to India, people think, oh, so you're on some kind of spiritual quest. No, I was going to India because it sounded interesting, and you apply for Fulbrights, and it was either India or Australia, and India sounded more interesting.
Was it an academic context? Did you go there to do studies or research? Or
I went there to teach psychology at Delhi University.
I see. And
because that's the position which was offered, and I got the grant, and I was able to go with my wife and two young children. And India being India, before going there, I had to fill out all kind of paperwork with my curricula and syllabi, and say what books they should order and what kind of housing we wanted and all this kind of stuff. And I arrived in India. And of course, nothing was set up, but I went to the Fulbright folks and sat there. And after about an hour's worth of chatting over tea, I thought I'd been polite enough. And I said, so when do I go to Delhi University to start there? And the head of Fulbright House took a little sip of tea and said, well, Delhi University does not have a department of psychology.
That may have been pertinent information.
But no problem, no problem. We'll work something out for you. So I went to eventually to the National Institute of Mental Health and Neuroscience in Bangalore, where I taught and did clinical work. But it was an easy job and fascinating colleagues and very little responsibility. And I had everything was really great there, and things were good with my family. And I wasn't happy. I was not unhappy. I was not depressed or anxious or tortured, but I just wasn't happy. And just I thought,
kind of subtle, pervading dissatisfaction.
Yeah, subtle, pervading dissatisfaction. There must be something more to life, and I didn't want to miss out on my life. And I ran across a book in a bookstore on opening the hand of thought, on shikantaza, which I'd never done before. And since I'd been disillusioned by Zen, by some things that I encountered in yoga, by some things I'd encountered in psychology, I thought, well, I'm not going to sign up for anything which requires me to believe anything. But Shikan Tazov, just sitting there and staying as open as you can, and doesn't seem like I'll be able to talk myself into anything and into some credo.
So it really resonated with you.
It really resonated with me. And when I came back to the United States after the Fulbright, I found my way to Berkeley Zen Center, where Sojun Roshi became my teacher.
So you were working in the Bay Area?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, so I'd go in every morning before work.
Was this Kaiser at this point?
5:40. Excuse me?
Were you working at Kaiser at that point?
Yes, I was working at Kaiser. Yeah. And I think it's worth telling the story of what really connected me to Sojun.
Okay, yes, please.
So after going to BZC, Berkeley Zen Center, for a while, I decided to go to my first session there. And I was still doing yoga every day for an hour a day. And I was feeling pretty good going into that session, pretty limber, pretty happy. And I thought, oh, and I looked at the session guidelines, and they started at 5 a.m. and ended at 9 p.m. And in Japan, session was 3 a.m. to 11 p.m. And I looked at this and I went, this is easy. I mean, geez, this is not rigorous at all. Well, this will be an easy, pleasant time. Well, you can guess what happened. I sat down and I immediately was just overwhelmed with suffering. And I had no idea why. I didn't have any particular thoughts, but I cried. I had terrible pain. I felt awful. And this continued for 7 days. Unremitting, with no idea what it was about. And at the end of the session, we had a shosan ceremony where everyone comes up and one by one, you bow in front of everyone, you say your question. So when it was my turn, I got up there and said, hey, I came here feeling pretty good. And the last 7 days, I've been it's been painful. I've been crying. I have no idea what's going on. And I just looked at Sojun and I said, what is this? And he looked me straight in the eyes and he said, Nirvana. And I knew he was right. It was just absolutely clear. I didn't understand.
Just hit you like a lightning bolt? But
it hit me like a lightning bolt. It was like, oh yeah, oh shit, pardon the expression.
And was he your formal teacher at this point, or were you just kind of showing up to sit?
I was showing up, and maybe I probably had a few practice discussions or dokusans with him, but after that I asked him to formally be my teacher, and he accepted me.
And did you do Jukai pretty soon after that?
Might have taken a couple of years to sew the rakusu and all, but pretty soon after that, yes.
Yeah. And how would you say that changed the texture of your practice, becoming a formal student and doing Jukai and so forth? Or did it? Maybe it didn't.
No, it did. It did. Well, not so much doing the Jukai. That was just a natural outgrowth. Sojun's teaching and the way he presented things, when I did Jukai, we didn't even study the precepts. It was just, okay, well, time to sew a rakusu. And you sewed the rakusu, and okay, time to give you a dharma name. And it was just absorbed by osmosis. Now, since then, it's changed there. And personally, when I give Jukai to somebody, I want them to have really worked with the precepts for a while. But that was Sojun's style. And so it all was just kind of, okay, well, do that. Okay, well, learn how to ring the bells. Okay, well, learn how to be the cook. Okay, well.
You know, I've sat, he was never my teacher, but I used to live in Oakland, so I'd sit there fairly frequently. And I always wondered about him, if he would have been like that if he had never, is that just who he was? Like if he had never practiced Zen, would he have been that way anyway? Or was that kind of an outgrowth of his practice? That was always kind of.
I think it was like this. I think he was just like that. And it fit the mold of that he encountered with Suzuki Roshi.
Yeah, I mean, maybe he got into Zen because he was like that. Maybe like the cause was the other direction.
Yes. Yeah, I think so.
And so was your practice under him, was it pretty mellow? Did he challenge you? Did you guys have drama? I mean, what, like?
Oh, all of the above. I mean, gee, I think I had been with him for 20 years before he gave me entrustment. So, you know, there were times when things were kind of quiet, and there were times when I needed to step up and be the session director for a couple of years.
Were you on the board there too?
I was never on the board. I was on various committees, the practice committee, the ethics committee, things like that.
Did you know Dayan Risotto when she practiced there?
No, she was before my time a little bit.
Oh, okay, yeah. And so was the entrustment kind of out of the blue? What did that? Like when that was first broached with you, what was your reaction to that?
Well, that came. I have a feeling my story here will be very similar to many other people's stories. So after many, many years of wanting to be a Zen teacher, kind of, no, not particularly. And because I had gotten involved with Qigong as well, and that led me in Taoist paths. And you know, in Taoism, there's many a story where someone comes to the Taoist sage and says, "Oh, you must be a sage. Will you please come teach? Will you please come advise us?" And the Taoist goes, "Get out of here. I'm running for my life." And Lao Tzu is one of the few teachers, whether he's a myth or not, who gave a set of teachings and then vanished, did not stick around. So there's really an emphasis in Taoism of just let things happen naturally. And I had kind of gotten to that point of, I was teaching Qigong, and that was very satisfying and enjoyable. And I was, practicing Zen, and I was really happy not teaching and just doing whatever. And that's when Sojun said, "Oh, I want to give you entrustment."
It might be the type of thing where the best presidents are ones you don't want the job.
That's right. That's right. And I honestly didn't particularly want entrustment, but your teacher asks you to do that, and then out of gratitude, how could I say no?
This is a kind of a nerdy question, but for Dharma transmission in Soto, there's a lot of preparation, a lot of copying documents, a lot of middle of the night ceremonies. And what was your entrustment similar to that, or was it more low key?
It was sew another rakusu,
Mm-hmm.
and then you sit up in front of everyone and you have like, I mean, before the entrustment,
Mm-hmm.
I was shuso,
Mm-hmm.
Several years before the entrustment.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, that has more bells and whistles,
Mm-hmm.
for sure. But for the entrustment, so it sit up and answer questions from the sangha, and that was about it. But it came at a time when I was moving out of the area up to the foothills. And so that's how I wound up establishing a practice center up in the foothills.
Was there any talk about, I know there's some issues on the difference between entrustment and transmission, and were you given explicit instruction on whether or not you could do jukai and whether you could in turn entrust someone else? Was there any?
Yes. Well, let me add a little to this story, which is a month or two after I received entrustment was the first meeting of the Lay Zen Teachers Association.
Mm-hmm.
And so, I was invited to go to that. And okay, well, it's up in Oregon. It's not so far. Sounds interesting, like a place to meet people. And I had no idea what this was about.
Mm-hmm.
But as it turned out, there were all these people who were Lay Zen teachers, brought together by Kyogen Carlson, actually, because
he was a priest.
Oh yeah, he was dharma transmitted from Shasta Abbey.
But
someone had asked him to give some talk about householders, and he said, it really would be nice if we had some householder Zen teachers who could be official and talk about this. So he was the impetus. And then when we got together, it was, well, so what's this about? And what do we believe in? And why are you a Lay Zen teacher rather than a priest? Mm-hmm. And together we kind of went, being a priest is wonderful. Mm-hmm. But there's something to be said for being a householder, non-priest, fully authorized to teach. And there are people from various traditions, Soto, Rinzai, Diamond, Sangha, Korean Zen. So there was quite a variety. And actually, after I came back from there and talked with Sojun about it, it was one of the big run-ins that I had with him, because as part of the formation of LZTA, we had to agree to give precepts to people. And my entrustment from Sojun said, you can give the precepts as long as a priest is present. And you're fully entrusted, you can teach, you can do all of this, but for the precept ceremony, a priest has to be present. And so I said, why does a priest have to be present? And he really felt strongly that this was the function of a priest, was to ordain people. And we went round and round about it and kind of came to we'll see how this all works out. And then when I went and started the sangha up in the foothills, he was extremely supportive. And the first jukai that I did, I asked him to co-officiate with me, and he did, and he made me a hanko and gave me the authority to come up with the dharma names and everything. And basically he sprinkled the water, but we did the ceremony together, and it felt very, very wonderful to be doing this together. And then something interesting happened, which was a couple of my students were actually there for Jukai, and there was a fire near where they lived, and they had to leave to go home, and they couldn't do the Jukai ceremony.
Mm-hmm.
So about a year later, might have even been 2 years, they said, we'd like to complete the ceremony. And I said, fine, you can come to Berkeley Zen Center and we can do it. And they said, we don't want to.
Oh, so the ceremony was at Berkeley?
Yes. Yeah. They said, we don't want to come to Berkeley Zen Center, and we're sure your teacher's a very nice person, but we really want you to do it by yourself.
Mm-hmm.
And this put me in quite a quandary. And I said to Mel, I want to be respectful. What do I do? He had already drawn up the lineage documents for them.
Mm-hmm.
I said to him, look, I don't feel comfortable saying to them, no, I won't do anything for you.
Mm-hmm.
But I want to respect you. So what about this? I can say, look, you can come here and get the whole thing, or I will do it for you, but you won't get a lineage document because that was signed by Sojun. And they said, fine. And then when I said to Sojun, so what about that? He said, they're all written up, just give them to them, just do the whole thing, which is very Mel, which is, he's got this hard and fast, it's got to be like this. And then when circumstances come up, well, you deal with the circumstances. So he was always very supportive of me. And he had his own particular take on this. And actually, before he died, I had the occasion to say to him, oh, I've been teaching various places and lecturing, and sometimes I'll lecture from your lectures, just like you used to lecture from Suzuki's lectures. And it's very sweet. And I know I'm not one of your dharma heirs because I'm not a priest. And I don't have dharma transmission, but it's still nice to do. And he turned to me and says, I consider you one of my dharma heirs. Says, the only thing you can't do is ordain people. To which I said, that's fine with me because I'm not a priest, and how could I ordain priests?
Did he give any indication whether you could in turn entrust somebody?
We left, that had been, we talked about it. He said, well, let's see what happens. And I've never been, while he was alive, I was never in the position where I had somebody who I felt I would want to entrust. So it's one of those gray areas. Now, since then, well, and then when you were trying to decide what to do, and there was a period where you said, okay, lay practice, I said, okay, well, we can do Jukai. No, I wanted to be all lay, no priest stuff. I kind of went, and just at that time, my friend Karen Terzano, a Lay Zen teacher in Ordinary Mind, said, hey, Bob, let me give you denkai so that you can give the precepts. I went to Finland and I got denkai so that I can officially give the precepts in Ordinary Mind. And she'll probably be coming out here this summer and will give me denbo so that I have full transmission. But to be honest, it doesn't matter to me at this point. It's just you provide what you can provide to whoever needs whatever they need.
Are the denkai and denbo, are those public ceremonies or are those one-on-one type of?
Those are public in Ordinary Mind. One of the things about Ordinary Mind, nothing hidden, nothing special.
Which, I didn't know Joko well, but that was very much her qualities when I met her.
Yeah.
So did through your long 20 plus years kind of Zen practice at Berkeley Zen Center, did you ever do any residential did you ever live at a practice center? I mean, you were lay all the way through, is that correct?
Lay all the way through. The only time I've lived at a practice center was in Japan.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I've spent some time at Tassajara, cleaning it or invited there by friends or things like that, but I've never lived there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And can we talk a little bit about your introduction to Qigong and how you got into that?
Sure.
Mm-hmm. And maybe place that on the timeline. You got into Zen. Was Qigong after that, or like?
It was after that, and I basically have been practicing Zen since about 1972, even though it wasn't necessarily formally with a teacher. I mean, when I was practicing on my own, I went through one of these phases of don't read anything, don't poison your mind with, documents and texts, which was a good thing to do for a while. So when I came back, basically I got involved with Shifu, my Master Hui Liu, my Qigong teacher, shortly after getting involved with Sojun and having him accept.
Was this the 80s or the late 70s? Like what?
This was late 80s.
Late 80s, okay.
Yeah. And basically I had chronic pain, fairly mild chronic pain, but persistent. And a friend of mine said, "Oh, I've been doing this Qigong stuff. Why don't you try it? It might help." And I had tried, every medical thing, every PT thing, all the Feldenkrais, Alexander, yoga, all of that. So I was skeptical, but I went, and I can't express my gratitude enough for running into or encountering Shifu.
And for people who don't know, she's a Chinese American.
She's Chinese American. She grew up in China. She was one of the main disciples of Grandmaster Yang Meijun.
Was she mainland Hong Kong or Taiwan?
Via Taiwan.
Okay.
Via Taiwan. And her story, so she came from an aristocratic Chinese family. I mean, the sort of family who would have played with the emperor's children, and her father was a renowned artist in China. And her husband, so Shifu and Shifu, we're not going to see their like again. I mean, they were brought up in the Chinese culture and arts, and Shifu was an artist and a calligrapher and Qigong practitioner. Her husband was the world head of Guangping Yang Tai Chi and the person who got Chinese medicine accredited for acupuncture in China, and an artist with paintings in museums, as does Shifu, and a calligrapher. And they just, I might get into trouble with this, but they embodied through and through in every particle of their being a tradition and several thousand years of culture, which the American teachers who I very much value and respect and who've given their lives to the Dharma, even when they have that sense about them, it's a pale version. And Shifu, just when Shifu died, his ashes coalesced into a jewel. The classic Bodhisattva thing, and it's there in the city of 10,000 Buddhas now.
Were they associated with City of 10,000 Buddhas?
Oh yes, very much so.
Okay,
very much so.
I didn't realize that.
Yeah, and when Shifu died, a rainbow appeared in the sky, And before Shirmu died, she did ask me and Jean and one of her daughters to be her heirs, carry on her tradition. But she did not say, okay, so you're the successor. She said, I don't want to indicate any successor because every one of my students who I've certified as a teacher has something good to teach. But she took us aside privately and said, you're the three I rely on to really convey. But we have no authority.
Yeah.
So a very interesting way of doing it, but
institutional authority.
No institutional authority.
Yeah.
On the other hand, you know, her daughters have asked me to teach the next generation of teachers, but it's so different from the Japanese model. And in the Tai Chi, you know, so most people, you learn Tai Chi a couple of years, 2, 3, 4 years. Shifu's Tai Chi took 10 years.
Is it the same form every time in that tradition?
Yeah. And one of my, you might have heard me tell this story, but the first time I saw Shirmu watching her hands as she did a certain movement, it was, you could see healing hands. And whereas her husband, I was scared by him for a long time. I mean, he was really, a very powerful person, so powerful. This is a true story that at one point when they went back to Beijing and he was about 80 and there was, you know, Falun Gong was out and you weren't supposed to practice Qigong or anything like that. And some of their students were practicing outside. And there was a regiment of the Chinese army, which was marching back and forth. And the army would elbow and kind of shove the Qigong students. And someone came and told Shifu about it. And Shifu came out and he's 80, he kind of looks and he goes, "Ha." That was Shifu. Ha. And he just stood there doing standing meditation. And the Chinese army marched, and went way around him. They were not going to fool with him. I mean, it was incredible to see. But Shirmu was much gentler. And you know, technically she could have been called Shifu, which just means teacher in Chinese, but she always insisted on being called Shirmu, wife of the teacher. It's very traditional, but completely secure in knowing this is what I know, this is what I do. You know.
Did they have was there meditation Qigong, or did they have a formal sitting meditation practice?
Oh yeah, they had a formal sitting meditation. And I don't know much about Shifu's, but Shirmu's, she would always do a week's worth by herself every year of not moving. I mean, literally not moving for a week, taking after Master Yang, when she was 106, said, "Oh, I'm not feeling so great. I think I'll sit down to meditate." And she sat down and meditated for 3 weeks without moving and without eating, without going to the bathroom. And her students thought she was dead, but they took a mirror and there was this faint. And after 3 weeks, Master Yang kind of opened her eyes, stretched out and went, "Oh, much better." Lived another 2 years.
So you went to the Qigong, you did it, and you had some pretty immediate pain relief, it sounds like?
Yes. Pretty immediate pain relief, very immediate experience of qi flowing. And well, some of the experiences that I had there are, I was skeptical. I mean, I'm a New Yorker. I didn't believe in this qi stuff. But when you experience it again and again and again, and it becomes palpable, to deny it is to not be scientific. I mean, we can't explain it necessarily, but.
I remember once I went to one of your Qigong classes and I got a blast of it so powerful it made me nauseous, actually.
Yeah. And well, and you had asked me to talk a little bit about my stroke in the Himalayas.
Yeah, please do.
And
where was that along the timeline?
So when I was 50, so that would have been the year 2000.
This is pre or post entrustment? Or around the same time?
I'm thinking would have been pre-entrustment.
Okay.
Pre-entrustment. I started going to the Himalaya because I love hiking in the mountains, and I planned to go once, but it really grabbed me, so I went several times. And one time I was up and I was going through a very stressful time in my life, and I was sick, and I had a bronchial infection, and various other things were going on. But long story short, I was walking along and I couldn't walk suddenly, and I just kind of crumbled.
And to set the scene, you're way up there in the Himalayas.
We're up at around 19,000 feet or so.
And were you near a village, or were you?
No, we were way out from anything. And actually, I was hiking with just one other friend, and the rest of the crew and other hikers had gone ahead. And I sat down, and my friend left me alone to go get the rest of the crew to come back to help me. So I had about an hour by myself alone in this rather amazing landscape. And I sat there, and I'm a neuropsychologist. I knew I was having a stroke, and I kind of said to the mountains, I'm having a stroke. I could die now, here. And the mountains replied. And I don't mean like I had an auditory hallucination, but I could hear them say, welcome. This is natural. Everything dies. Mountains do too. And it was incredibly comforting. And actually, one of the things which impelled me to spiritual practice was I had a big fear of death as an adolescent. And that had mostly gone away, but this was different. It was quite transformative, but it was one of the ways it was transformative was when I got back home. I had a period where I kind of went, okay, let's be honest, Bob. You've been eating properly, exercising properly, meditating daily, doing Qigong daily, and you still had a stroke, and you're still going to die and have suffering and old age and illness and death. Well, WTF, Why should I bother with all these things? What can I really rely on? What's the foundation of my practice beyond the sort of party line of Qigong will help you live forever, and Zen will help you realize that nirvana and samsara are two sides of the same coin, both of which are true, kind of, sort of. But it was, okay, what do you really believe in? And over the course of a year, I figured a few things out. Not as part of my formal practice either way, but everything comes together. Anyway, towards the end of the year, I got into this talking about powers of Qigong. I was about 85% better, maybe 80% better. I mean, not bad, but noticeable slowness, memory problems,
Did you have to
problems
take a
doing
break
the
from work?
Qigong. Excuse me?
Did you have to take a break from work?
My work was very good in accommodating me with things that I could do, but let's just say that I couldn't do my neuropsychology testing because I couldn't do the tests. You know, I took some of the tests and failed them. And, you know, I've had clear neurological symptoms. So anyway, I was pretty much better, but Shirmu turned to me one day and said, still not better. I give you Qi treatment. And many kinds of Qigong give Qi treatment for illnesses, and our form does not very much. Our form is more do this and stay healthy. But, you know, sometimes we'll give Qi treatment. So Shirmu said, I'll give you a Qi treatment. And my first reaction was, oh no, uh-oh. What can she do? I mean, I have a stroke. I shows on MRI, CAT scan. It's all very nice for, you know, minor things, but come on. But your teacher says to do something, so you do it. And I was worried I'd go, I'd get a treatment, and I'd have to be all grateful, but nothing was really going to change. Anyway, I went up, and her daughter's an acupuncturist. This was at a friend's place. Her daughter puts the needles in me. I'm lying back. And I suddenly feel this massive, intense heat. And I think to myself, didn't think there was a heat lamp here. And I get up and turn around, and there's no heat lamp. It's just Shirmu with her hand there. And I lie back down and I say to myself, wow, the placebo effect is really strong. I didn't believe this stuff. I said, well, that's okay. And I could kind of feel it going through my body and nervous system. And after about 20 minutes, Shirmu said, okay, and stopped. And, you know, the needles were taken out. I stumbled over to a friend's couch and lay down, and I slept for 20 hours straight, uninterrupted. And I woke up and I was 100%.
It's amazing.
Yeah. And I didn't tell people I'd had a treatment or anything. And people would say to me, Bob, you're your old self. And I was. And, you know, it's very hard to argue with something like that.
How can I get this for my back?
That's right.
It's amazing. Yeah.
It is amazing. And it doesn't work for everyone, and it doesn't work all the time, and it's quirky, and it did not prevent me from needing to have back surgery, even though I used it for, well, it helped me for 20 years with my chronic pain. But it's amazing stuff. It's wonderful. For me, it's mostly wonderful because I do want to say one other experience I had with the Qigong, which is highly pertinent to Zen practice.
Okay.
So when I was learning to be a teacher, I was in the first teacher training course Shirmu did. And one night, it was after work, and I had had a hard day at work, and I didn't feel so great, and I really didn't want to go to the teacher training, but it was supposed to be a lecture, and I figured, okay, I can just sit there and take notes. Well, I got there, and the person who was going to lecture wasn't there, and when it wasn't a lecture, Shirmu would choose someone from the group and have them demonstrate one of the movements of the form, and then work with them until they got it better. And guess who she chose that night? Well, me, of course. So I got up, and I don't remember what movement it was, but I did it, and she said, no, no, no. And she worked with me, no, no, no. And, you know, by saying, getting it right, it's the difference, say, between this and that. I mean, it's very subtle. And she worked with me for 2 hours. She wound up sending other people home, and she worked with me for another hour. And all the time I'm not getting it right, not getting it right. And finally she says, okay, enough for tonight. And so I bowed to her and said, thank you, teacher, going, thank heavens, I'm out of here. And I walked out of the studio and I walked about a half a block and I stopped in my tracks because I was flooded with a sense of health, of wellness. And I literally stopped and I felt like every cell in my body was fully alive and healthy. And I said to myself, I've never known what it's like to be really healthy. This is what health feels like. It's not the absence of disease. It's this. That lasted for almost a week. And even talking about it, I can kind of tune into it now. And the reason I say this has an important connection with Zen is, first of all, the whole thing of you practice and you practice and you practice and you think, okay, this is going to make me feel better, and you feel lousy. And then all of a sudden something happens, and who knows why or how or when. So it was certainly very much in line with that kind of Zen experience. But the other thing is, you probably know the koan, Dongshan is unwell, where Dongshan had been ill, and the student says, oh, you've been ill? And Dongshan says, yes. And the student is a smart ass. He says, oh, is there anybody who doesn't get ill? I mean, this is Buddhism. Of course, everybody gets ill. So the students are smart ass for saying this. So Dongshan is supposed to say, of course, everyone gets ill. But Dongshan says, yeah, there's someone who doesn't get ill. And the student goes, oh, really? So does that person who doesn't get ill take care of you? And Dongshan then says, I have the opportunity to take care of that one, which of course confuses the student. He says, I don't understand, you're ill and you're taking care of the one who doesn't get ill, and what happens then? And Dongshan says, then I don't see any illness anywhere, ever. So, many people approach this koan as, oh, so you take care of the one who doesn't get ill. Well, sure, you should take care of the one who's healthy. Yes, but you take care of the one who is healthy, where there's no counterpart to illness. The health which includes health and illness, pain and happiness, suffering and its release. And that experience in the Qigong, and many, many other similar experiences, has sort of helped me throughout periods when I am sick or in severe pain, or difficult violence in the world, or problems with people I love, their suffering, to look for that and touch that. And I am so grateful to it. And frankly, I think if I'd done either Qigong or Zen, I never would have experienced this. I needed both. I don't think everyone does need both, but I needed both.
There's definitely some branches of Zen where they really feel like the energetic component is mandatory.
Yes.
Our Soto heritage probably would not be in that category.
That's very true.
There are definitely lineages that put a lot of emphasis on the energetic component.
Yes, and actually the Shasta Abbey lineage, which is Soto, put a lot of emphasis on the energetics.
I didn't realize that.
Yeah.
Great.
I'm feeling like I need to stop.
Okay. Yeah, I think we're in a good spot. real quick, could you talk briefly on what is your pain level like these days? You had the surgery.
Very little pain.
That's great.
Lots of, as long as I don't do certain things.
Okay.
Although, now that my back pain's better, the whole body's readjusting. So I have lots of other joint pains as I learn how to move and whatnot. But no, very little in the way of pain. Happy to say.
Yeah. Okay. Well, thank you so much.
Oh, thank you. I feel too much talking about myself, but
I know it's helpful to people to hear these stories. You know?
Yeah, well, yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
It's we're all just people, blundering our way through all this.
My motivation for actually starting this podcast was, thinking back, what motivated me to practice Zen wasn't, the hearing somebody's dry Dharma talk or even koans. It was hearing the narrative of people's practice journeys.
Yeah.
And they really resonated with me, and that's kind of my motivation for doing this.
Well, and I picked up on that, and I think it's wonderful, and I really appreciate it. So I want to bow to you for that.
Thank you.
And I'm glad that we found each other and can practice some together.
Definitely. Yeah. Thank you so much.
Yeah. Okay. Bye for now. Then. Take care.
Bye bye.